for joining me again on A+ Maths. As we're studying straight lines, we need to know how to write the equation of a straight line. The equation of a straight line will always be able to be written in the form y equals mx plus b, where m is the gradient and b is the y-intercept. And the y-intercept, for those of you who don't understand what that means, is where the line cuts the y-axis. Where it cuts the y-axis. Not the x-axis, the y-axis. You cannot tell from this equation, without working it out, where this line cuts the x-axis. You can only look and see where it cuts the y-axis, and the only time that you can actually read the information off your equation is if it is in this form. It has to be y equals, and it's always a good idea to put x next and then the number. So if I have a look at these questions, y equals 2x plus 3, I can read off straight from the equation what's the gradient and the y-intercept. Here I know that the gradient m is going to equal 2 and the y-intercept is going to be plus 3. B equals 3. The y-intercept is always b. The next one, I have that the gradient is going to be minus 3. Remember, the gradient is always what's in front of the x, as long as it's in the right form. And my y-intercept is going to be 2. Here I know that my gradient is going to be 4, and my y-intercept is going to be negative 2. If I come over here and I have a look at these two are not in the right form. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is to rearrange the formula using the algebra that I know to first make it in the form y equals mx plus b, and then, and only then, can I read off the gradient and the y-intercept easily. So I need to move the 2x to the other side. So I have y equals 5 minus 2x. But of course I don't like the minus 2x to come after the 5. I want it in this form with the x first. So I write y equals minus 2x plus 5. And then very easily and very quickly, I can see that the gradient is minus 2 and the y-intercept is 5. So there's no real problem, except for the fact that I need to make sure that I know how to rearrange the formula and change the subject to y. Here I have 3x minus 2y equals 8. Again, I'm going to minus the 3x to the other side. This time I'm going to put it first so that I don't have to have an extra step of working. And then I need to divide everything by minus 2. So I have y equals minus 3 over minus 2x plus 8 over minus 2. And then I just need to simplify. Y equals 3 over 2x minus 4. And from that, I can see that the gradient of this line is 3 over 2 and the y-intercept is minus 4. So you just have to be careful of the pluses and the minus and know how to rearrange a formula. We know that the equation of a straight line can always be written in the form y equals mx plus b, and I've already shown you that the m in front of the x is the gradient, and that the number b at the end is the y-intercept, where the line cuts the y-axis. So now we need to figure out what the gradient actually means. So the gradient of a line is how steep it is. It's the slope of the line. And most of you would already know that the gradient, which is m, is how steep it is, which is how high it goes depending on how far across it goes. And that's called rise over run. The gradient of the line, the slope, how steep. And of course that brings us to our third formula, which is the gradient of a line, which is y2 minus y1, which is the rise, over x2 minus x1, which is the run. But this is only if I'm given 2 points. If I was given the equation of the line, then I would be able to tell you what the gradient was from the equation. So we can find the gradient of a line 2 ways, depending on what information we're given. If we're given the equation of the line, we can just read off the gradient straight away. If we're given 2 points like A, -1, 4, and B, 3, -2, and I want to know what the gradient of the line is, or what the slope of the line is that joins those 2 points together, then I would need to sub the numbers into the formula like this. x1, y1, just like always, x2, y2, and then I could sub it in to find the gradient. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, -2 minus 4 is -6, 3 plus 1 is 4, so the gradient will be divide the top and the bottom by 2, -3/2, no problem. So that's how we can find the gradient from 2 points, or if we're given the equation, we find it from the equation. Now remember, sometimes you will have noticed that sometimes the gradient is positive and sometimes the gradient is negative. Obviously that must make a difference. We need to know that if the gradient is positive plus, then the gradient of the line will always look like that. If the gradient of the line is negative, then the line will always look like that. It'll always be in that direction. I like to remember because positive is correct, and if I put a little thing there, it looks like a big tick. So the tick is positive, that's correct, and then that one is not correct. So you can remember them however you like, just as long as you remember that if the gradient is positive, it looks like that, and if the gradient is negative, it looks like that. Now let's have a look at using the equation of the line to sketch a graph without having to draw a table of values. So here are 3 different equations that I'm going to now sketch from the equation of the line with very little working, without a table of values. And we can now do that because we know that the equation of a line, y equals mx plus b, tells us the y-intercept and the gradient m. And what else do we know? We know that if m is positive, then the line will look like that, and if m is negative, then the line will look like that. And as long as we know those 3 bits of information, what the gradient is, what direction it is, and where the line crosses the y-axis, I can actually find the graph and draw it on my number plane. Let's see how it's done. I'm going to write down the gradient is 2 and the y-intercept is 3. Now remember that gradient is rise over run. So if I tell you that the gradient is 2, you might go, well, that's not rise over run, that's just 2. So if we like to, I'm going to put that as 2 over 1, so that I now have rise over run. That might help us when we're graphing it. I need to find my y-intercept, which is 3. Now that we have a point that we know is on our line, we need to do everything from that point. Our gradient is 2 over 1, rise over run. I like to think rise is going up and run is going across. I'm a creature of habit, so I like to do the same thing every time, and then I don't usually forget what to do because I'm doing the same thing. And I'm not trying to find a trick that works for every question and then have too many things to remember. I start from my point 3. I need to go up 2 and across 1. Rise over run. Up 2 and across 1. Up 2 and across 1. Now this is interesting. Which way do I go? Do I go across 1 to there, or do I go across 1 to over there? And that's where knowing if the gradient is positive or negative comes into handy. I know that my gradient here was positive. That means that my line should look like that. Well, if I choose the point over there, and then I join my 2 points, my line won't look like that. So I know that it's going to be that point over there, and I join the 2 dots. Always put arrows on the end of your line because they keep going. Let's have a look at another one. My gradient is the number in front of the x, which is -3. I'm going to put it over 1. Remember, that's rise over run. And the minus tells me that it looks like that. And I know that the y-intercept is 1, the number at the end, as long as it's in the right form, y equals mx plus b. So my y-intercept is 1. I label that first. Now I need to use the gradient to go up and across. I need to go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and across 1, or here or over there. But of course I know that the gradient has to be negative, which means that I have to choose that point. Otherwise, my line will be going in the wrong direction. Is that easy enough? Let's have a look at this one over here. So my gradient is 2 over 3. This time it's a fraction. It's still a plus. So I have rise over run. I know that it should look like that. If you like to write it down, write it down. And I know that my y-intercept is -1. So I find my y-intercept first. Then I need to go up 2 and across 3. Up 2 and across 3. 1, 2, 3. It's either going to be over here or up 2 and across 3 over there. But of course I need my line to look like that. So it's got to be that point over there. And then I just join them up. That's how you can draw a line from the equation. Let's have a look at one that's not in the right form. So we're going to do the same thing here with this question, 3x plus 2y equals 8. The only difference is that it starts off by not being in the right form that we like, y equals mx plus b. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is to rearrange it and put it in the right form. I need to move the 3x. I get 2y equals minus 3x plus 8. And then I divide everything by 2. Y equals minus 3 over 2x plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. I now am going to do this question exactly the same way that I did my others. I know that the gradient is minus 3 over 2. That's the rise over run. I know that the gradient is negative, which means that my line should look like that. And my y-intercept is 4. So let's get started. I need to first, do you remember? Plot the y-intercept, 4. Great, 1 point down, 1 down, 1 to go. I now need to look at the gradient, which is 3 over 2. We don't need to worry about the minus just tells us the direction. So we're going to go up 3 and across 2. 1, 2, or is it up 3, 1, 2, 3, and across 2 over there? Which one? I know that it's got to be a negative gradient, which means it's got to look like that. So I'm going to join up these two. And I'm finished. Thanks again for watching the videos. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe below. See you next time for more.